or both, social change via revolution or reform. So this is our topic of the evening, and it's very much a hot topic in mainstream politics and academic circles and in the community. A small caveat, I think that it's very interesting that we are having this talk about President Obama because 2013, as we roll into the new year, will mark the 150th anniversary of the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. And so, ironically, following President Barack Obama's inauguration will be a year-long celebration of the emancipation of African people in this country. So, keeping that in mind, I'd like to introduce you to our two speakers tonight. And I'm going to quote him. Attorney Michael Coard says he is the angriest black man in America. No. Welcome. No. Right? And we also have Dr. Anthony Monteiro, who is faculty here at Temple University in African American Studies. So welcome. I'm going to give you a brief description of the outline of how tonight is going to roll, so we won't be confused. So, each panelist is going to have about 12 to 15 minutes to present an argument, right? Following this, and I will let you know at the time. Following each panelist's argument, there will be a 25-minute sort of debate dialogue between the two. And then we're going to open up questions to the audience, and we'll have a whole section for Q&A there. And then we'll have our closing remarks. So, everybody clear? Wonderful. I guess we will begin, and we're going to start with Michael Coard. President Barack Obama, sellout savior, neither or both, social change via revolution or reform.
I'm glad that everybody is here because this debate is very, very important. We're going to raise some issues that really need to be discussed. But before we begin, I want to thank you all for coming. I want to welcome you all. This is, as indicated there, the political rumble in the jungle. So I want to thank you all for being here. And I want to thank Mr. George Foreman, Dr. Tony Monteiro, for being here also. Having said that, I think that a few of you, maybe many of you, heard the preliminary portion of our debate on WURD 900 AM about a week or so ago. And one of the things that I really liked about that debate is it was a passionate debate, but it was a respectful debate. It was a courteous debate. And to me, that's essential when black men come together, when black people come together, when oppressed people come together. Now, this is the issue. We're dealing with President Obama, sellout savior, neither or both, and also social change via revolution or reform. And I'm going to try to blend them in because I know we don't have a whole bunch of time. What it comes down to, from my standpoint, is this. It's idealism versus realism. It's purity versus progress. It's perfection versus progress. Now, what do I mean by that when I say perfection versus progress? I normally don't quote European philosophers, but Voltaire made a good point. He said, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. When we look at President Barack Obama, and then we look at Mitt Romney, when we look at the Democrats and look at the Republicans, we can legitimately say they're all full of shit. We can say that. And now once we say that, then what? Do you go into a cave and say they're all full of shit, so we're just going to say they're all full of shit, and we're going to protest and march and sign petitions saying they're all full of shit. And you just keep saying that, but you don't do anything. The key here is to do something. You can attack President Obama all you want. You can attack Mitt Romney all you want. You can attack the Democrats all you want. You can attack the Republicans all you want. But you have to have something to put in its place. And often when people attack these powers, they attack them from an ideological standpoint. They might be communists and say the whole system is just so screwed up, I'm not going to participate. They might be socialists, like me, and say the system is screwed up. Whatever it is, they have this ideological kind of political religion where their ideology says that the system is classist, the system is racist, the system is sexist, and therefore they bow out of it. And by doing that, they actually wind up hurting the so-called good guy and helping the bad guy. I'll explain that in a minute when I get to the 2000 election with Ralph Nader and George Bush and Al Gore. Before I do that, one of the things I want to read, and I want to make sure I quote this properly, because it comes from somebody who we all know and love and respect and revere. None other than the great Malcolm X. This is what Malcolm X said. Quote, when you have a gospel, I don't care whether it is a political gospel or an economic gospel. If it's not going to do something for you and me right here and right now, to hell with that gospel. And to me, that's profound, because a lot of us are really enlightened, and we have these political ideologies that kind of make us political purists. And because we're the political purists, we're not politically mature. The Democrats and the Republicans are the only game in town on the federal level. And what do I mean by that? I love what Jill Stein stood for in the Green Party. I love what Rocky Alexander stood for in the Justice Party. But think about it. I love what Ralph Nader stood for in year 2000. But what happened when a progressive third party jumps into the fray? You got these two giants, the Republican over here, the Democrat over here. And for whatever reason, we can debate about that later, the more regressive people tend to move toward the Republicans. The more liberal people tend to move toward the Democrats, even some progressive in the Democratic Party. So now you got these Republicans and Democrats fighting for victory. But then something happens. A more progressive candidate comes along. A Jill Stein comes along. A Rocky Alexander comes along. And the people like you who are progressive are thinking, wow, they're saying the right thing on minimum wage, right thing on death penalty, right thing on ending the war, right thing on gender equity, right thing on everything. But then there's a faction in the Democratic Party that's saying the very same thing. But there's nobody in the Republican Party saying that. So let's say you got, theoretically, 100 persons who could vote for the Democratic Party, 100 persons who could vote for the Republican Party. And that's all you got in America, 200 persons. And then you got this progressive candidate who comes along. That progressive candidate is going to take 5 of those 100, 10 of those 100, 20 of those 100. And now you got only 80 left, but those regressive Republicans still got that strong 100. And don't get me wrong, Rocky Alexander and Jill Stein and those 20 who pulled themselves out of the Democratic Party, they are right in terms, they are correct in terms of ideology. They're correct in terms of politics. But at the end of the day, their actions turn out to be counterproductive. Say what you want about Al Gore. But compared to George Bush, look at who's going to appoint the 200, potentially 200 federal district court judges, the potential 400 circuit court justices or judges, and the 9 Supreme Court. So you've got George Bush appointing judges, or you got Al Gore supporting judges or appointing judges. Who do you want in that position? And when Malcolm X says that when you have a gospel, I don't care whether it's a political gospel or an economic gospel, if it's not going to do something for you and me right here, right now, to help that gospel. So take your communism, take your socialism, take your progressive ideology, just like mine, but what is it going to do? I'm standing here today as a lawyer because Democrats push the notion of affirmative action. And because they pushed the notion of affirmative action, Ohio State University was forced or compelled to take the skinny kid from North Philadelphia and let him into Ohio State to learn the law, to pass the bar, and then to fight for people like Dante Dawson, fight for people like Mumia Abu-Jamal, only because there was a pathway. Are the Democrats perfect? Of course not. But like I said at the beginning, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. It's like if we looked at this whole system as a corrupt card game, and we walk in and we see everybody cheating, and we say, well, I'm not going to participate in that game. But what if that's the only game in town? What if the only way you can get from point A to point B is to go through that game? Well, you got to find out either who's cheating the least or who's not as bad. People often compare Barack Obama and Mitt Romney as the lesser of the evils. And I guess you can make the argument. And one of the things I'm going to say right now in terms of that kind of rope-a-dope analogy I made in regard to Dr. Monteiro at the beginning, he's going to hit me with some left hooks, some right hooks, some uppercuts about drones, about Israel, about the corporate prostitution of the American political system, about the prison industrial complex, about the wars. And I'm just going to lay on the ropes and just take the punches left and right, because what I'm going to say is, I'm going to say you're right. Everything you say about the crazed support for Israel, you're right. Everything you say about Barack Obama being a serial killer with those drones, I'm going to say you're right. Everything he says about Barack Obama supporting the death penalty, I'm going to say you're right. But I'm going to say this also. If you think he's bad, look at this guy, Mitt Romney. In fact, Mitt Romney, if you think Obama is bad, you should be scared shitless of Mitt Romney. That's the reality. That's the reality of this. And again, I'm not saying love Obama, because I don't love Obama. I kind of joke with Dr. Monteiro and say that in the beginning when I heard about this guy who was the Chicago community activist, and this Chicago state senator, and then this U.S. senator, that's the guy I knew, and I signed up for the Obama fan club. In fact, I was the president of the fan club. And then I heard about this National Defense Authorization Act, which makes the Patriot Act look like nothing in comparison. The National Defense Authorization Act is one of the worst things that any president has ever done in the history of the United States of America. Because basically what it says is that the Constitution means nothing. That if the president believes that somebody is engaged in terrorism, the president can move in, not just move in. The key thing about the National Defense Authorization Act is, for the first time in American history, it authorizes the killing of American citizens on foreign land. That has never happened before. If an American citizen was on foreign land and did something to affect this country, you grab him up wherever he is, bring him back to the U.S., give him a lawyer, and put on a trial. Well, that doesn't happen in the National Defense Authorization Act. So when you see Dr. Monteiro hit me with that, I'm not stumbling, I'm not staggering, I'm dancing. Because I'm like, I know what you're going to say. I know what this is. But I keep saying, if you think Obama is bad, look at what's in the wings. Look what's waiting in the wings. So when you talk about, I'm not sure how much time I got. Okay, 5 minutes. That's going to be a whole bunch of time for this knockout. So when you talk about these horrible things that President Barack Obama has done, nobody can make the argument that Mitt Romney would do better, that Mitt Romney would do more for black people, or do more for poor people, or do more for women. It seems to me that, and this is really important, if you despise what President Barack Obama has done, you should despise even more what Mitt Romney can do. Because all those bad things you're talking about Obama, I agree with you, and I'm saying they're so bad, make sure his big brother doesn't get in. Because if his big brother gets in, it's going to be worse. Because right now, I can say, okay, little brother did support affirmative action. I'm going to say, little brother did agree to increase the minimum wage. I'm going to say, the little brother did support the Lilly Ledbetter Act. I'm going to say, the little brother did give $1.5 million in the Pickford settlement to the black farmers. Would Mitt Romney do anything like that? Of course not. I'm going to talk about the little brother signing the 2009 hate crimes bill. Would Mitt Romney do that? I'm going to talk about Barack Obama finally changing the disparities that the people who are sentenced with crack cocaine don't get 1 million times more in prison than the people who have powder cocaine. Would Mitt Romney do that? I'm going to talk about the little brother who put together the White House Initiative on historically black colleges and provide more funding to black colleges than any president has in the history of the United States of America. Would Mitt Romney do that? I'm going to talk about the Pell Grant increases. I'm going to talk about the financing of this urban initiative to give more money to inner cities, and that money goes to schools. I'm going to talk about all those things. As bad as Obama is on immigration, and he has certainly kicked more people out of this country than any other president. However, as bad as he is, Romney's going to do worse than at least President Obama talked about a path to citizenship. If you're under 30 years old, and you came here when you were under the age of 16, now you got a path to citizenship. Is that great? No. But a half a loaf is better than none at all to hungry men and women. And that's what we are here. We're hungry men and women. We want the whole loaf. We deserve the whole loaf, but we're not going to get it. The last poet said, "Speak not of revolution unless you're willing to eat rats to survive." So don't talk that shit to me about you, this hardcore revolutionary, because unless you're ready to eat rats to survive, don't talk about revolution. Okay. The only revolutions we've had in this country was when the white man came here and took the land from the red man and women. The only revolution we had in this country was when the colonists took up arms against the British Crown. The only revolutions we had is when the North went against the South. And in all those revolutions, they had something that we don't have. They had money and they had guns. People always talk about Mao Zedong said, power comes from the barrel of a gun. He didn't say that. He did say that, but he said something else. He said, power comes from the barrel of the gun when you got the guns. But when you don't have the gun, power comes from the people. So how do you make real revolution in America? You make real revolution in America through reform, unless you're willing to eat rats to survive, unless you're willing to take up arms. One of the most enlightened groups in recent American history were the Weathermen. The Weathermen were a faction of students for a democratic society. And they had the right ideology, but they had neither the guns or the money. Think about it. What's the first thing an agent provocateur does when he comes into an organization? He starts some shit by telling you to pick up some guns, to do some crazy stuff. But if you're level-headed and if you're reasonable, you'll think twice. I got about 30 seconds left, so I really got to get Dr. Monteiro with the key points that he must respond to. We all know him to be, and this is, absolutely true. Nobody can contest this. The preeminent Du Bois scholar. Nobody knows more about Du Bois than Dr. Monteiro. But what I want him, Dr. Monteiro, to respond to is this. Back in 1932, W.B. Du Bois supported Woodrow Wilson against Taft. And you might say, what's the big deal? Woodrow Wilson was a hardcore racist. Not only was he a hardcore racist, when he was president of Princeton University, he said, no niggers allowed. And then when he becomes president, he makes official the type of segregation in the federal government and in the military that never existed since 1863. This is Du Bois supporting a racist. Why did he do that? Was he a sellout? Of course not. Was he an accommodationist? Of course not. He was a pragmatist because he knew that one of the things that black people needed but didn't have is some money. One of the things that Woodrow Wilson agreed to do is, although he segregated the military, he provided equal pay in the military. So the black soldier got the same amount as the white soldier, so that when the black soldier got out, he can take that money back to North Philly. He could take it back to Chicago, to Compton. And Du Bois stood back and said, this guy's a racist. I know he's a racist, but I can support a fellow communist or a fellow socialist who's not going to win, and that means this black soldier won't be able to take that money back to North Philly. But if I support the guy who's likely going to win, and he gets in, now he provides the money our community needs. I have more to argue, but I think I've done enough damage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and of course I want to extend my hand of solidarity to my friend, colleague, and comrade in arms, Michael Coard. I just want to acknowledge his great generosity. And deep commitment to the people. And to thank you all for coming out here this evening to listen to this debate, which Michael calls a rumble in the jungle. And he gave the title to this. As you know, he has the flair for the dramatic and the spectacular. And since we're quoting Malcolm X, Malcolm X also said in 1961, after the election of John F. Kennedy, you put him first and he put you last. I think we might be in a similar situation today. This is an opportunity, however, for us to restore what I call black civil society. And in spite of the enormous propaganda and distortion and character assassination, all in an attempt to silence, debate, and critique during this election year, we African Americans and our allies have found a way to come together and to discuss in a civil way those issues which affect us as a people and our future in this country and in this world. So I want to give you all a shout out, because without the people, there can be no progress. If you think, as the Obama campaign, funded by over $1 billion, and next question is, where did that money come from, tried to have us believe that either Obama or the abyss, either Obama or complete disaster. In this way, they set up a situation where there would be no debate, no discussion, no critique. And of course, the two parties, the Republicans and Democrats, agree upon one thing: that when they, quote, debate, there won't be any third parties involved. And so the debates turn out to be really not debates, because they will say over and over and over again, well, I agree with President Obama, I agree with Governor Romney, and they agreed on more than they disagreed on. Because at the end of the day, the over $2.5 billion that funded their campaigns came pretty much from the same people. The 1%, the corporate Wall Street economic interests that run this country. That is the debate that the Obama apologists don't want us to have, especially in the black community.
Sure.
Because see, once you cut off debate, once you cut off discussion, what you are saying to a people is that now you don't have to think. And once we don't have to think, they can impose and enforce upon us passivity. And for oppressed people, passivity is the most dangerous drug. Worse than crack, worse than heroin, worse than ecstasy. That's the worst drug. And what those who wish to control us are most interested in is that we don't think. So we got MSNBC. That's supposed to be the liberals. Then you got Fox. That's supposed to be the conservatives and the right wing. CNN is in the middle. But when you say who is discussing the interests of black people, the fact that black unemployment is 2.5 times that of white unemployment, that black wealth is 1/10 of white wealth, that a family making $150,000 a year is less likely to get a mortgage than a white family making $40,000 a year. If you want to have a discussion on poverty, don't look to the presidential debates, because they don't want that discussed. And really, if you want to have a discussion on civil rights, They don't want to discuss civil rights. They want to talk about something that happened 50 years ago. But what about the attack upon civil liberties and civil rights as we speak today? And the big question is, can we be a nation and a society committed to permanent war on a global scale and at the same time fight for social justice here at home? You will recall that Martin Luther King broke with Lyndon B. Johnson, the most pro-civil rights president in the history of the United States, and I include in that Abraham Lincoln. Because if you didn't know Abraham Lincoln's final solution to the Negro question was to send us all back to either Africa or if we couldn't get there, Nicaragua. So Lyndon B. Johnson was probably the most pro-civil rights president in the history of the United States. And certainly when it came to a war on poverty, at least acknowledging poverty, he was the most pro-anti-poverty president since FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt. Right. Martin Luther King, on principle and in good faith, broke with Johnson over the question of the war in Vietnam, a war based on a lie, just like the war against Iran that this administration is planning is based upon lies and complete lies. The war that they're planning in Syria, of course, all of this after the election, nothing discussed in the debates, keep the black community focused on the wrong things, no protest against Obama because he is the new Moses, and so on and so forth. But now they're planning war in Syria. What is the justification? The same justification that they used for the war in Iraq, weapons of mass destruction. You read the newspaper today. We're concerned about what the Assad, as they say, regime is doing with its chemical weapons. And there's a red line that we're drawing, and if they do a certain thing with their weapons, we are prepared to go in. It was on issues like these that the great Martin Luther King broke with Lyndon B. Johnson. In case you didn't know, talk about the lesser of two evils. It was Nixon, and we thought it would be Lyndon B. Johnson. Johnson dropped out, you might recall, in May, and opened up the Democratic primary, and in the end, it was Nixon versus, who was it? Humphrey, yes. Martin Luther King at that very moment was talking about running on a third-party ticket, the Peace and Freedom Party. There's nothing sacrosanct about the Democrats and Republicans and the lesser of two evils, an obsolete concept in the 21st century anyway. And if you want to talk about W.E.B. Du Bois, in 1952 and 1956, W.E.B. Du Bois publicly announced that he would not vote in the federal election. And he said, why? Because he said we have one party with two different names. They both stand for the same thing, austerity at home and war abroad. And that's the same thing today. When I get to the end of this, I'm going to tell you my voting record and explain why I have voted the way I have voted in national and local elections. But before we go there, this thing of the vote. You know, so many people who try to squash criticism and discussion will always say when an election comes around, if you don't vote, you don't count. Our ancestors died so you would have the right to vote. Well, I consider myself one of those ancestors now. I was around during that time. I knew people who went into the South and fought for the right to vote, like Stokely Carmichael, like A. Trap Brown, like many, many others. I knew those people. Now, Stokely went to jail more than any person who was in the Southern Civil Rights Movement for the right to vote. I could guarantee you, had Stokely been given the option in 2012 of Romney or Obama, he would have called for black people not to vote. I can guarantee you that. Du Bois said in 52 he wouldn't vote. In 56 he said, I'm not going to vote for either of these people. And if we look back upon it, Eisenhower and Adlai Stevenson are liberals compared to Obama and Mitt Romney. We have moved that far to the right. Let us be clear. This nation, this political system is so far to the right that we are on the doorstep of fascism. Now, just one other personage. Huey P. Newton and the Black Panther Party, since the issue of revolution has been raised. Of course, the Black Panther Party got their idea and their paradigm of revolution in many ways from Malcolm X, who said either the ballot or the bullet, either reform or revolution. But revolution was never taken off the table. That's the point. You take revolution off the table, reform is hollow, is empty. You need the two of them.
That's right. Right.
Understood that all power comes from the people. Not from the Democratic Party, not from the elected officials. I hope I don't disturb anybody today. Not from the preachers. Not from the professors. Power comes from the people. Power comes from the people. What is the strategy of the anti-people people? To make the people think they are powerless. How do you make the people believe they are powerless? By telling them that, well, if you don't go with the man that looks like you, you're going to get the man who doesn't look like you, and the man who looks like you is your savior. That is taking power from the hands of the people. Now finally, more powerful than the vote is the truth. Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. But it is the scaffold that sways the future. Both Martin Luther King and W.E.B. Du Bois were fond of quoting that. What is the scaffold? The scaffold is what they build to hang the opponents of the system. Truth forever on the scaffold. Truth forever on the cusp of death. A lie forever in power. But if you want to know the future, it is the scaffold that sways the future. So we, an oppressed people, more than any other people, have a direct interest in the truth. And where does the truth come from? The people, once again. All power to the people. Now, I want to just quickly, because I know we don't have a lot of time. Michael set up a straw man. And that straw man was unfortunately me. He had me on his show because he wanted to get my talking points. But as you can see, he was prepared. But he hollowed them out. There was no logic to it. But as I said to Michael on the show, as he presented his position, I said, Michael, all you've given us are the Democratic Party talking points. That's not enough. I know what the Democratic Party has said throughout this election. We need more. Then I went on to ask about such questions as this. Austerity. Now, we've all heard about the fiscal cliff, right? This is a manufactured crisis. The real crisis is the crisis of unemployment, poverty, and mass incarceration. Let us just look at the black community, because what we're looking at in the black community is not just what they call cyclical unemployment. In other words, like I said, we're in a recession and things are going to get better. We're going to come out of the recession. And As tides rise, they'll raise all boats. You've heard that before. Well, let me tell you something. The unemployment that we're looking at now is structural, it's institutional, and it is not going to be repaired. We are looking at an existential crisis of capitalism. The system is in crisis. How do you know the system is in crisis? Well, all you need to do is look around.
I got tissue?
Yes.
Okay. Get him the tissue. Box tissue. I don't know.
What they call the Great Recession for African Americans is a Great Depression. It is unending. It is, in political terms, invisible. Black people, outside of our votes, are expendable. It was very obvious. The question of poverty only mentioned once by the friend, quote unquote, of the Negro, Barack Obama. If you are my friend, why did you not make poverty a central issue? Now let's talk about Philadelphia. We know Philadelphia. We don't have to go anywhere else. Philadelphia. I would estimate that 75% of black Philadelphians either live in poverty or are on the edge of poverty. You can go to some neighborhoods in West Philadelphia, in Strawberry Mansion, in West Oak Lane, and you'll find not 10%, not 15%, you'll find 75% unemployment. People who have never worked. Now, what is the effect of unemployment? People said, well, look, we went through slavery and we survived that, but we all didn't survive that. That's why they call it a crime against humanity. Yes. Don't trivialize it by saying we've known worse times than these. We've known bad times since we've been here up to this day. And it's bad now. Unless you think that young woman or that young man who doesn't have a job and doesn't have an education and won't have a job and will not have an education in this society as it exists, unless you think that young person is expendable, you get outraged at a man that claims to be like you because he looks like you and doesn't mention the deep problems that you face. Now, a lot of people say, well, you're politically naive. Remember in 2008? Well, he couldn't say that because he had to get elected. He couldn't have a black person around because it wouldn't look good to white people. But what about this time around? We still don't count? Malcolm was right. You put him first and he put us last. Now, on this, how much? Okay, I'm going to say this. My last point.
Keep going.
My last point. A lot of people have asked me, did you vote in this election? And I'm here to tell you, no, I didn't. The first time I voted was in 1972. And the reason one of the reasons I voted in 1972 was I was running for office. I ran for Congress. I knew McGovern couldn't win, and Nixon was going to have a landslide, as he did. In 1976, I voted for Carter against Ford, the Nixon appointee, after they impeached him, or he was driven out. In 1980, I voted for Carter again, against Reagan. In 1984, again, First of all, I was in the Jesse Jackson campaign in the primary, but he didn't get it. So I voted for the Democrats. In 1988, I voted for Dukakis against George Bush, the old man Bush. In 1992, I voted for Clinton against Bush on the question of the war in Iraq, the Desert Storm. In 1996, I voted for Nader. In 2000, I voted for Nader. In 2004, who did I vote for in 2004? In 2004, I think I voted again for Nader. In 1971, here in Philadelphia, I voted against Rizzo. In 1985, the first black mayor and Rizzo running against each other, I didn't vote for either of them. I wasn't going to vote for Wilson Good, who dropped the bomb on Move. I wasn't going to vote for Rizzo. There comes a time in the life of an individual, in the life of a people, where your moral standing means more than temporary political calculation. Now, there's such a thing as bad faith and such a thing as good faith. Bad faith is lying, delusion, lying to yourself and lying to other people. Good faith is to stand up against the lie. I think as black folk we need to start right here and right now to stand up against the lie that we have a lesser of two evil, the lie that Obama's going to do something that he never planned to do, the lie that Obama is a black man. Let's get that straight. That's a lie. Stand up against the lie, and once we stand up against the lie, we can stand for truth, and once we stand for truth, we can see our future, the future of our children and the future of our grandchildren. Thank you very much.